Hello everyone, it's Justin Adkins. I'm so excited to be back on the Scrapbook.com YouTube channel. Today I am going to be sharing a 2-for-1 Easter card tutorial featuring some products that I love by Scrapbook.com. I'm going to be pulling in products like the nested egg shape dies, the hip hop hooray word dies, different A2 cover plates, and some really fun pattern and glossy cardstock. I'm pulling out the Sun-Kissed pattern paper collection, and I'm going to pull out an initial collection of colors that I want to use for my first card. We're going to be using the Polka Dot Aqua pattern, the Solid Coral pattern, and the Crosshatch Yellow pattern as well, and we'll be using those for the first card. I'm also bringing in the Pastel Glossy cardstock, and we'll be using the mint colored glossy cardstock for our card. I'm going to trim the aqua polka dots down to an A2 size, so that's 4¼ by 5½. I am using a guillotine trimmer to do so, and we are going to be doing some dry embossing with dies. I'm going to use the Brix A2 cover plate shape die, and I am going to take my aqua polka dot pattern and tack it down to the die with some mint tape. So I'm going to help hold this in place by doing it. I'm also going to spritz the back of it with a little bit of water. I've learned that by spritzing a little water onto the back before you go ahead and emboss helps prevent any sort of cracks in the paper. I wanted to show you the sandwich I'm going to be using with my Platinum 6 Spellbinders die cutting machine. And I'm using the sandwich where I'm going to be using my platform base first. After that, I'm going to be putting down the layer B platform. Then I'm going to take my die with the die facing up. I'm going to put the E adapter plate and then the D adapter plate on the very top. I'll go ahead and process this through my die cutting machine, and here you see I have that Brix pattern dry embossed onto the paper for a really fun and textured background. I just adore how this looks, and I am going to trim it down to so it's a little bit smaller, so it's about 4⅛ and 5 by 3/8, and this will just help with framing it on the card base later on. I'm going to pull in some paper splatter watercolor for my card as well. First using the opaque pale yellow paper splatter. These are both by Picket Fence Studios. If you have seen some of my card tutorials before, you know that I love these paper splatters on cards because it really helps to add some fun detail to your background and elements. So I'm going to splatter the liquid snowflake white next. This is not opaque, so it's going to have a little bit more of a translucentness when it dries to the paper, and this really just adds some really awesome glittery goodness to your background. So once I get everything nice and splattered with the paper splatter watercolors, you're going to see how the light really catches those different splatters and how it just adds a fun detail to your background. Once I have that all completed, I'm going to work on die cutting the eggs for my project. I'm going to pull in the nested shape dies for the eggs, and what we're going to do is we are going to alternate. I'm going to use half of these dies, and we're going to die cut about 6 different dies because there's 12 that are included. So I'm using the largest die. I'm going to skip the next largest side and go to the 3rd largest die. Then we're going to use the 5th largest die. After the 5th one is in place, we're going to use the 7th largest die. Next is the 9th largest die, and then we will finish this off by using the 11th largest die. And here I have them all put into place onto that mint glossy pastel paper. I do tack down my dies with some 1-inch mint tape, and this is going to help keep all of the dies in place as I process them through my die cutting machine. As I work on getting all of my die cuts taken care of, I do keep everything organized in a stack and sort tray. Now, I very carefully remove all of my dies with the mint tape still in place from the mint glossy cardstock and put it onto the coral cardstock that we had pulled earlier. I'm able to very quickly process it through my die cutting machine and add these dies into my stack and sort tray. We're going to do one last easy removal of the dies. We're going to put it onto the yellow crosshatch pattern and process that through our die cutting machine as well. Here you will see that we've got all 3 colors of the different egg die cuts ready to go for crafting. What I'm going to do is take the largest die. I'm going to use the crosshatch yellow pattern, and I'm going to use my Misty Precision glue press to adhere this frame of sorts to my brick background. So I'm going to very carefully get that put into place, and you're about to see in a minute that I'm about to increase the speed of this video so that we can go through each of the layers a little bit more quickly. After I get the yellow put into place, I then move on to the glossy mint color. So I'm going to use my Misty Precision glue press and put that shape into place. It fits perfectly for this layer. And then we're going to put in a piece of the coral cardstock in between the next layer. So we've got yellow, mint, coral, and then I do use a large acrylic block to make sure that everything is getting even pressure. I'm going to repeat the same color pattern. So now we're going to do yellow crosshatch, we're going to do mint glossy, and then we will finish off with the smallest die cut of the little coral egg. Now I'm going to use the reverse side of that aqua polka dot paper, which is just the solid aqua color, and I'm going to use this to die cut the shadow of the sentiment Happy Easter from the Hip Hop Hooray word dies. So I'm going to use a little bit of mint tape, and I will tack down this die cut to my paper, and then I'm also going to use a piece of white mixed media paper to die cut out the letters and sentiment. So this sentiment is going to say Happy Easter, so I will go ahead and place my die cuts onto my white mixed media paper, and I'll tack them down with some mint tape. Once they are processed through my die cutting machine, I want to do a very little amount of ink blending for our die cut sentiment shadow. I'm pulling in some Mermaid Lagoon Distress ink, and I'm going to use my foam blending tool to add some distressing to the bottom edge of our shadow element that we had die cut. I want the bottom edge to be the darkest, and I want it to fade into that lighter color of paper. Once I have all of my ink blending on my sentiment shadow die cut completed, we're going to begin the process of adhering the different letters and words onto our die cut. I'm not going to show you all of the letters, but what I do want to let you know is tweezers and liquid adhesive will really be your best friends. Utilize the tweezers since you're using some smaller, more detailed die cuts, and I think that liquid adhesive works just a little better because it allows you to get a couple extra seconds of playtime to nudge your sentiments into the correct location. You're not locked into the very first spot that you put it down to the paper. So with my sentiment completed, we can now adhere our brick background to an A2 sized card base. Now, because we did trim down that card front to be about 1/8 of an inch short on each end, we do have a really nice white frame around the panel. I'm going to use some 3mm foam strips on the back of our sentiment die cut that says Happy Easter. I love adding some foam tape to different die cut elements of our card because it really allows it to pop. It's something that you can't notice too much in a video or a photo, but your recipient is really going to love it because in person it really makes those elements pop out at you. Now, once you have that sentiment nicely into place, I thought that it would be nice to add one more element. So I'm going to be using some satin pearl pops of color. This is the 4-ounce bottle to add some different pops of color drops to our card. I'm just putting them in different spots, little clusters, trying to work in odd numbers wherever I can, and I'm getting them down in different sizes as well. I do like to advise, be mindful when using your pops of color for where you're resting your hand. It's very easy to lose track of where you've already put pops of color, so you don't want to go ahead and forget where they are and accidentally smudge them with the palm or base of your hand while you're adding them to your project. What's really nice about pops of color as well is that if you tap the back of your panel, it makes them flatten out and become more rounded, and it takes away the pointy edge of it. So I make sure to do that before this card is fully completed, but like I told you, after this card is done, we're doing a 2-for-1. So I'm going to show you how we're going to get card number 2 out of some of our leftover die cut elements. So I'm going to pull back in that pattern paper Sunkissed collection, and I'm going to use the wavy multicolored background. But I want to do a little bit more of dry embossing, so for this we're going to use the Stitch Stripe A2 card die. I'm going to repeat the same process of tacking down this cover die to the pattern of paper that we want to use with a little bit of mint tape, and off camera I am going to spritz it with water just so when we process it through our die cutting machine it helps to minimize any sort of paper warpage or seam issues. I do trim this down so that it is about 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 inches so we can take advantage of a white frame from our card base. I am splattering this with the same colors we used for the previous card, so I'm utilizing the opaque pale yellow paper splatter, and then in addition we'll be using the liquid snowflake white paper splatter just to add a little bit of embellishment, but also by using the same colors, it helps tie in the two cards as an intended set. Now what I will also be doing is using those leftover die cuts with the same technique to add a center egg element to our card. This time I am going to start with the glossy mint paper as the largest egg, and then I'm going to go to the coral paper and then the crosshatch and repeating. Technically I have enough elements left over to create a third card, so I encourage you to do that if you're making this card on your own. I just didn't do it for this video. For our second card, we're going to be using the sentiment Hip Hop Hooray from the Hip Hop Hooray word die set. I'm using that Mermaid Lagoon distressing once again to distress the bottom edge of the shadow for the die cut. This is where all of our die cut letters and words will be adhered to really make that sentiment pop. Once I have the edge of my die cut all nicely blended, I am going to use my tweezers and liquid adhesive combination technique again to make sure that each of my letters and words are appropriately put into place. Once again, I'm not going to show you how all of the letters get put into place. I don't necessarily think that's something you need to fully watch, but you get the gist and we have our sentiment ready. I'll be using foam tape once again to adhere this to the top of our card so that it has a little bit of focal image for when your recipient receives your card. I use liquid adhesive on the back of the card front and then I adhere it to the front of my A2 card base. Like I said, because we trim the edges, there's a really nice white frame around the card, which I just think adds a really nice extra detail. I pull in those satin pearl pops of color once again for this card as I do want the two cards to coordinate. I really like how the satin pearl color, or rather just the white of it, really coordinates nicely with the white lettering in our sentiment. I just think it kind of ties a lot of elements together. Also the in-between colors between the color stripes as well. So don't forget to tap the back of your panel to flatten out those pops of color to make them have a more enamel dot finish. And there you have it. We have our second card all completed, so it truly is a 2-for-1 technique. I hope this card sparks a little bit of Easter inspiration for how you can turn your favorite scrapbook.com spring theme products and create your very own collection or set of holiday cards to send to loved ones. Now don't forget to follow me on all socials at Justinote by Justin, and then always remember, for the best selection, free inspiration, and fast shipping, scrapbook.com has you covered. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel today, and I can't wait to see what you make. Goodbye.